You do not miss the past. You miss the version of life that hurt you less. People say the old days were better, but most of the time, that is not memory. That is exhaustion looking backward for somewhere softer to stand. The past did not shine this much when you were living inside it. It had confusion. It had loneliness. It had nights you thought nobody saw. It had fear you have now turned into nostalgia. That is what pain does. Pain edits. Pain softens the edges. Pain removes the noise. Pain makes distance look like peace. So when you say life was better back then, be careful. You may not be telling the truth about the past. You may be revealing the weight of the present. Sometimes the sentence "I miss who I used to be" really means I am tired of carrying who I am now. Sometimes the sentence "things were better" before really means I do not know how to survive this version of life without losing something in me. That is why the past starts glowing when the present becomes too heavy. Not because yesterday was perfect, not because you were happier, not because life was finally fair, but because memory becomes a shelter when reality feels too cold. And people do this all the time. They call it nostalgia, but sometimes it is grief, sometimes it is burnout, sometimes it is disappointment that stayed too long and changed the way the world feels. Sometimes it is the quiet shock of realizing you kept moving forward without becoming lighter. So no, the past was not always better. It was simply farther away from the pain you're trying to name now. That is why old songs feel kinder. Old places feel warmer. Old photos feel safer. Not because they contain a perfect life, but because they do not ask anything from you anymore. The present does. The present demands energy when you are already drained. It asks for decisions when your mind is crowded. It asks you to keep going when part of you wants to sit down and disappear for a while. So yes, of course, the past begins to look beautiful. Anything looks beautiful when it no longer presses on your chest. But that beauty can fool you. Because if you keep worshipping the past, you may never understand what the present is trying to tell you. And maybe the message is not go back. Maybe the message is you are hurting. Maybe the message is you have been strong too long. Maybe the message is this life no longer fits the way it used to. Maybe the message is you do not need a time machine. You need rest. You need honesty. You need room to admit that this season of your life is heavier than you wanted to say. That is the harder truth. It is easier to praise the past than to confess the present is painful. It is easier to say I miss those days than to say I am struggling to stay open inside these ones. But one sentence keeps you asleep. The other brings you back to yourself. So when the thought comes, life was better before, pause. Listen more carefully. It may not be longing. It may be distress. It may not be gratitude for what has passed. It may be a quiet cry for relief in what is here now. And that matters. Because once you stop romanticizing the past, you can finally notice what the present is begging for. Less pressure, less pretending, less performance, more truth, more breath, more permission to be tired without turning that tiredness into failure. The old days do not need to be erased. You can still love them. You can still thank them. You can still miss them without building an altar out of your pain. But do not confuse distance with peace. Do not confuse memory with healing. Do not confuse a softer image with a better life. Sometimes what you call nostalgia is simply a bruised heart trying to find a gentler language. So know the past was not always better. Sometimes the present is just harder. And once you admit that you stop chasing old light and start protecting the life that is still here,